3 years of bankruptcy and 3 years wasted. During the divorce, my ex-wife fought me for custody of our son. She confidently suggested, "Why don't we ask for his opinion?" My son, holding his phone, glanced at me calmly and asked, "Are you really going to divorce?" "Yes," I nodded. "All right." He lowered his head and continued playing his game. "I'll stay with Dad. Let him have more of the assets, or I'm afraid he won't be able to support me." Chapter 1. My son was dragged into the bedroom by his mother. I worriedly wanted to follow, but the door slammed shut in front of me. Inside, I could hear Willow's frustrated voice. "David, let me ask you again. Are you really going to stay with your dad? Don't say I didn't warn you. He's been bankrupt for 3 years. Do you really think he could take care of you?" My son's indifferent voice came through. "Mom, it doesn't really matter who I stay with. The main thing is, haven't you already found someone else? If you take me into your new marriage, will Uncle Ito be okay with it? Will his family be okay with it? I'm doing this for your sake." Willow was clearly embarrassed by the mention of her actions. The voices inside softened. I couldn't make out what they said afterward, but my temples started pounding. I collapsed onto the living room sofa, rubbing my head, trying to ease the pain. The more I rubbed, the worse the pain became, and my thoughts grew more muddled. I don't know how long passed before the bedroom door opened again. Willow walked toward me, looking at me with a complicated expression. Her brows were furrowed, but there was a hint of concern in her eyes. She handed me a glass of water and a pill. "David can stay with you." I lifted my head drowsily. She continued, "The car and house were things you bought when we got married, so they'll stay with you. I've been managing the money all these years, and honestly, there's not much left. I'll leave you $500,000, and I'll take the rest. If you agree, we can finalize the divorce tomorrow." I looked at her blankly. To be honest, I was the one who wanted the divorce. But when it came to actually going through with it, I wasn't so sure. All these years, Willow had been managing the household finances. After my company collapsed, I asked for some money to help me through, but she claimed there wasn't any left. It had all been spent on me and our son. Before I could respond, David suddenly spoke up. "Don't give the car to Dad." I came back to my senses, a bitter smile forming on my lips. He was his mother's son, after all, siding with her. But in the next second, he added, "Dad doesn't know how to drive. After he went bankrupt and lost his chauffeur, the car's just been sitting there. Mom, you should let Uncle Ito drive it instead. Besides, with Dad's driving skills, it'd be a crime to let him behind the wheel. It's better to sell it. That car's worth at least $1 million. Add $2 million for the house, and I think that's fair." Willow looked at David with a deep gaze. He shrugged nonchalantly. Willow turned back to me and said, "All right then. See you at the Civil Affairs office tomorrow at 9. Chapter 2. The door closed behind her. I let out a long sigh. With Willow gone, she might never come back. We had been together since college. Young love, so pure and sincere. I thought we'd grow old together. I never expected it to end like this. "Dad?" David's voice pulled me out of my thoughts. "I'm hungry. Did you make dinner?" I quickly stood up, rubbing my neck. "I'll go make something right now." His voice sounded a bit aggrieved. "Dad, please don't make another disaster meal. You're about to get $2 million. Can't you just take me out for a nice dinner?" I took David to a barbecue restaurant downstairs. He wrapped a piece of pork belly in lettuce and handed it to me. "Dad, this is all you can eat. You should eat more to get your money's worth." "Okay." I stuffed it into my mouth, but it tasted like cardboard, impossible to swallow. I thought about all those articles online about how divorce affects children psychologically. I carefully opened my mouth. "Son, even though your mom and I are divorcing, she's still your mother. We may have our differences, but don't hold it against her." He replied, "I don't hold it against her." He flipped a chicken wing over and said, "Dad, you shouldn't hold a grudge either. Hating someone is exhausting. It'll slow down your eating." He sat across from me, and through the rising smoke, I could barely see his face. Chapter 3. In the morning, I was sitting on the edge of my bed, lost in thought, when David knocked on my door. "Dad, it's time. Let's go, or we'll be late." I was speechless. Why do I feel like he's more eager about this divorce than his mother is? I opened the door and looked at him suspiciously. "Why aren't you at school?" He gave me a complicated look and said, "Dad, it's July 1st, summer vacation started. For over a month, I've been in such a daze that I even forgot about his vacation." Feeling guilty, I patted his head. "Sorry, son." He tilted his head and smiled. "If you really feel bad, take me on a trip. Let's go to the beach, dive, and eat seafood." He made a peace sign with his hand. I couldn't help but smile. "All right." The gloom in my heart seemed to lift a little. Makoto and Willow came together. We haven't even divorced yet, and they're already showing off in front of me. David took the initiative to greet him. "Hey, Uncle Ito, you came along even in this heat. What? Planning to marry my mom right after they get divorced? That's not allowed. At least give it a month." Makoto glared at him, grinding his teeth, just about to speak. David turned to Willow. "Mom, I mean no harm. I'm just worried you'll get tricked after the divorce." He seemed to know something and continued pointedly. "If Uncle Ito doesn't marry you, and you invest your money in his company, wouldn't it all go to waste? Money gone, love lost. I'm just worried for you." Willow unconsciously nodded, glancing at Makoto, a complex emotion flashing in her eyes. Makoto quickly said, "Willow, don't listen to this kid's nonsense. I truly want to marry you. My company is as much yours as it is mine. I'll go back to the car now and explain later." Chapter 4. We submitted the divorce registration application. Next comes a month-long cooling-off period. Makoto drove over in the car Willow got, calling out to us in a tone that was half polite, half provocative. "I'll give you two a ride back." I was just about to refuse when David took a big step forward and opened the car door. "Dad, come on. I'm roasting out here." I had no choice but to get in with him. Makoto looked exasperated. We sat in the back with Willow in that familiar seat up front. Makoto adjusted his breathing, then asked Willow tenderly, "Honey, where should we go to celebrate later?" David leaned over and interrupted directly. "Uncle Ito, let's go to Panda Restaurant. My dad loves their food. Whenever something good happened, he'd take me and my mom there." From the rearview mirror, I saw Makoto's face grow longer than a donkey's. It might not have been very kind, but I secretly enjoyed it. David leaned back, relentless. "Dad, where should we go for our trip? How about we skip the beach and go to City C? They say City C is the capital of flings. Maybe I can get a new mom there." Willow's expression didn't look too good either. She asked, "You're going on a trip?" She glanced at me through the rearview mirror. I nodded. Yes, I didn't want to waste words with them. Turning my head to look out the window, Makoto, undeterred, said, "A trip sounds nice, but there's not much to do in City C. Why not go to Sanya? A friend of mine opened a hotel by the bay." David leaned over again. "Sure, uncle. When your friend asks who recommended it, I'll say my mom found me a new dad behind my real dad's back, all right?" I burst out laughing, completely ignoring Makoto's face, which had turned as black as the bottom of a pot. Chapter 5. In the end, David and I went to Sanya. According to him, it would be a waste not to take advantage of the opportunity. He was excited, making 3 full pages of plans. I didn't want to be a disappointing father, so I made an effort to keep up with him. 13 or 14-year-old boys are full of energy. During the day, I went skydiving, surfing, and diving with him. At night, we visited night markets and caught little sand crabs. By the end of the day, I was so exhausted my bones felt like they were falling apart. I fell asleep as soon as I hit the bed, with no time to dwell on post-divorce sadness. After returning from Sanya, I originally planned to take a good rest. But then he had something to say about my cooking. "Dad, the dishes you make aren't bad, but they're a bit lacking in variety." I gave him a sidelong glance. "You're lucky there's food on the table, and you're still picky?" He scratched his head and laughed sheepishly. "I'm not complaining, just saying it's a bit repetitive. If you could add more variety, I'd definitely eat my way to 6 feet too." "Get lost." I patted his face and smiled. After all this time, I finally understood. This kid was just trying to keep me busy, so I wouldn't have time to feel sad. My taste in wives might not have been great, but my kid is a treasure. What is there to be sad about? Chapter 6. I decided to find a job. Although I could get $2 million, that amount runs out fast when you actually start spending it. David's tutoring fees alone cost tens of thousands a year, not to mention daily expenses. If I just sit around spending, it'll all be gone before long. After being a boss for over 10 years, then going bankrupt and unemployed for a few years, I honestly don't know what skills I have for work. I thought about finding something easy to start with and then changing jobs once I'd gained some experience. I share my idea with David. After all, if I started working, I wouldn't have as much time to take care of him. He thought for a moment and said, "Of course I support you getting a job. But job hunting is like dating. You need to strategize first." Hearing his mature words, I laughed and couldn't help teasing him. "Kid, are you in a relationship already? How would you know? Have you even dated before?" He retorted confidently, "You tell me. If you just settle for the first one you find, and later on you meet a better one, would you break up or stick it out?" I thought about it. He had a point. If I just took any job, it would be troublesome later on if I found a better opportunity, taking leave for interviews and all that. David, ever persuasive, added, "No rush to find a job, but there's something else that is urgent." "What's that?" I asked. "Cancel my tutoring classes?" "No way." I refused firmly. "Dad," he wailed, "I'm your son, not a workhorse. For tutoring subjects a day, it's killing me." Chapter 7. After a friendly discussion, we decided to cancel the Chinese and English tutoring classes, keeping only math and physics for now. If there's progress in the future, we'll adjust accordingly. "Long live Dad!" David cheered, running 2 laps around me in joy, and even voluntarily completed a set of English exercises. Our lives gradually settled back into a routine. One day, I was placing an order from a link Victor had sent me. David leaned in, watching for a while, then suddenly asked, "Does Uncle Victor make money doing this?" "It's all right," I replied absent-mindedly as I made the payment. He tugged at my hand, his big eyes sparkling. "Dad, I think you'd be really good at this." I felt a stirring in my heart. Withdraw the divorce application. Chapter 8. I was stunned for a long time. Though I was the one who proposed the divorce, she had likely had this in mind for some time. Otherwise, why would she have been picking fights for the past 3 years, constantly putting me down? Her sudden change caught me off guard. "Why?" I asked. Willow's eyes avoided mine. After a long pause, she said slowly, I can't bear to let go of our family." My mind drifted back to the early years of my business when I traveled frequently. Every time before I left, Willow would hug me pitifully and say, "Honey, the baby, and I will miss you. Come back as soon as you can once you're done." But later, all that was left in her eyes was disdain. Seeing my hesitation, she moved closer and held my hand. "Honey, can't we make this work? Do you really want our son to grow up without his mom?" Expressionless, I pulled my hand away, a trace of sarcasm in my eyes as I looked at her. "Willow, you're the one who cheated, and you're the one unwilling to pay the price. How could you think it would be that easy?" Chapter 9. If something seems unusual, there's always more to it. I asked a friend to look into Willow's current situation. What I found out shocked me. Makoto ran a trading company. Basically, he made money by buying and selling, leveraging supply chain advantages. Half a month ago, a batch of goods he bought was found to be counterfeit. The upstream supplier vanished, and the downstream clients refused to accept the goods, demanding full compensation. Apparently, Willow had emptied her own savings trying to cover the hole, but it wasn't nearly enough. Now she couldn't even come up with 10,000, let alone the 2 million. It seemed her visit was not just about trying to weasel out of the 2 million. She might have her eyes on this house. We lived in a school district property worth at least 5 or 6 million in the current market. Back when we agreed to divorce, I didn't know what David had said to her. Maybe she still felt a shred of guilt toward us. Or maybe she thought she was set for life with Makoto, so the money didn't matter. She signed the divorce agreement without much fuss. But now that all the money had gone into Makoto's pockets, these assets had become her lifeline. But the idea of making the ex-husband pay for the lover's mistake. There was no way that was going to happen. Chapter 10. Once the cooling-off period ended, we were supposed to proceed with the divorce certificate. But I couldn't reach Willow. She was obviously stalling to prevent the process from moving forward. As I was considering my options, a package arrived for me. Inside was a USB drive containing evidence of Willow's affair. Videos of her and Makoto embracing and going to a hotel, as well as explicit screenshots of their chats. I took a picture and sent it to Willow along with a message. If the amicable divorce doesn't work, I can take this to court. A while later, Willow called me. Honey, are you really that heartless? We've been together for over 10 years. Does it all mean nothing to you? It happened to be raining heavily that day. When she called, I was standing at a crossroads downstairs with wind howling from all directions. I spoke softly. Willow, you were the one who ended it first. She said nothing more. In the end, Willow came alone to finalize the divorce. Makoto wasn't with her. She looked completely worn out. I heard that Makoto's trading company was basically out of working capital and almost shut down. They couldn't delay payments to suppliers or wages to employees. It seemed Willow had been drained dry by Makoto. Chapter 11. As we parted, she grabbed my arm. George, let's have a meal together. I was about to refuse when she spoke urgently. Even if we're separated, we can still be friends, can't we? Can't we even share a meal? I knew her too well. Such humility wasn't because of lingering feelings. She must have something to say. I nodded. We picked a random restaurant near the civil affairs office. After sitting down, she kept picking at her fingernails, looking like she wanted to speak, but couldn't find the words. Not wanting to waste time, I spoke first. Willow, just say whatever it is you want to say. She hesitated for a moment, then cautiously said, about the $2 million in the agreement. Can you give me some more time? Makoto? Sure, I interrupted her. Her eyes reddened. George! She suddenly reached out to grab my hand, but I pulled it back without a word. I said, I'll agree to delay the payment by a year, but with 10% interest as per market rates. And also, talk to Makoto. I want to get goods from his company as a premium distributor. Victor had always said quality sources were hard to find, either too expensive or of poor quality. David happened to overhear him say this and chimed in. Uncle Victor, I know where you can get what you need. It was like finding a pillow when I needed one. I had been thinking about how to broach the subject with Willow, but she walked right into it. After all, being a premium distributor for Makoto's company meant you had to take on inventory worth over $1 million. Willow hadn't expected me to negotiate terms. She was stunned for a while, then pursed her lips and said, You've changed, George. You used to. Willow. I interrupted her again. I knew what she was going to say. I used to care about nothing but her and our child. No matter how hard it got, I never complained. As long as they could live well, I was willing to do anything. I said, only young people act like simps. Guys like me, middle-aged, only care about pros and cons. I raised my glass and clinked it against hers. Boss lady, here's to a smooth partnership. Chapter 12. With a steady supply of goods, I quickly shifted from reselling to hosting my own group buying events. This was more profitable and allowed me to develop my own group buying leaders, expanding my sales channels and coverage. Since the platform was new, it came with a lot of support and incentive programs. I registered a company and hired professional operations planning and customer service staff. Life was busy but fulfilling. Willow, on the other hand, wasn't doing so well lately. A while ago, Makoto's company faced increasing difficulties, and he lashed out at Willow when she pressured him for repayment. In front of everyone, he slapped her. Willow lost her balance, and her stomach hit the edge of a table. Chapter 13. It turned out she was pregnant with Makoto's child, and the impact caused a placental abruption. Not only did she endure a lot of pain, but the baby also died in the womb. When Victor told me about it, he sounded gleeful. He said, I told you karma gets people like her. I was reviewing the month's financial report and replied calmly, as long as it doesn't affect our business, it's fine. I thought Willow and I would stay out of each other's way from then on. However, she kept contacting me, saying she missed David. She even sent a scarf to my house on Valentine's Day. It was winter break, and David received the scarf. He looked at me with a strange expression and asked, Dad, did you get a new girlfriend? I was passing through the living room and took the scarf. It had faint gold moon patterns, and a card with a big orange cat on it fell out. It read, Flowers fade, the moon endures, two hearts as one. My thoughts drifted to the past. When I first gave Willow flowers, those were the words I wrote on the card. But now the flowers have withered, the drifting clouds have scattered, and things have changed. I threw the scarf and card into the trash. David stood there for a while, then suddenly asked, Dad, does Mom want to get back together with you? I thought about it. It was time to have a proper talk with him. I motioned for him to sit on the sofa. Son, you might think I'm selfish, but there's no way for your mom and me to go back to how things were. He shook his head and smiled at me. Dad, I'm happy that you think this way. You should always remember that you're you first and my dad second. Nothing is more important than your own happiness. Chapter 14. With my son's support, I plan to find an opportunity to make things clear with Willow. I arranged to meet her at a restaurant near our house. Just as I was leaving, David insisted on coming along. He wouldn't listen, so I had to take him. It was my first time initiating a meeting with Willow since the divorce. She seemed to have dressed up for the occasion, wearing a white dress I once bought for her. When we walked in, she greeted us excitedly. George, David, you're here. David gave her a once-over and teased, Wow, Mom, you don't look so good lately. Your face is all yellow. Is it because Uncle Ito can't afford a maid and is making you do all the housework? You know, when you were with Dad, you didn't lift a finger. I guess you really love Uncle Ito. Willow gave an awkward smile. Mama's been a bit tired lately. David nodded, speaking in a mock-wise tone. That's why people need to be careful with their choices. If you pick the wrong one, there's no turning back. Right, Dad? Willow couldn't even force a smile. David ordered some dishes he and I liked and sat beside me, ready to play on his phone. I glanced at him, and he quickly said, I promise I won't play games, just checking messages from the teacher. I said, Oh, I was actually about to let you play a bit. Long live Dad. Seeing my interaction with David, Willow's eyes turned red. She wiped away a tear and kept piling food on David's plate. It's been so long since our family sat down to eat together like this. I put down my chopsticks and sighed. Willowy. Chapter 15. Suddenly, a figure rushed over and slapped Willow hard across the face. Makoto screamed hysterically. Willow, have some shame. Are you addicted to cheating? You're my wife now. Can't you stop flirting with other men? Willow clutched her face and shouted back. Why won't you let me go? You took all my money. What more do you want? Willow, you slut. What money? You owe me. You're a curse. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have lost so much money. I'm drowning in debt, and you think you can just sit here happily with him? The next moment, that madman grabbed a bowl of soup and threw it at me. David quickly jumped in front of me, and the scalding hot soup splashed onto his chest and arm. The exposed skin turned red instantly. I pulled David behind me and punched Makoto in the chest, pushing him away. I anxiously asked David, Are you okay? Does it hurt? Are you burned? Ignoring Makoto and the stares of others, I frantically checked David over. Dad, I'm fine, David reassured me. Thankfully, the soup had cooled a bit, and aside from some redness and swelling, he was okay. I finally relaxed a little. Makoto's face twisted with rage. He said, George, Willow is my woman. Don't think I can't see through your dirty tricks. To me, you're nothing but a clown. I was about to retort when I saw a flash of silver in his hand. Instinctively, I shielded David. Pain shot through me. I vaguely saw David lift his foot and kick Makoto away. As I began to lose consciousness, a random thought flashed through my mind. All those years of Taekwondo lessons really paid off, much more than those tutoring classes. Chapter 16. I don't know how long I slept. In a daze, I heard David muttering in my ear, Without your son's skills, don't try to play hero, all right? I've got a mountain of homework, and now I have to take care of you in the hospital. Tell me, how are you going to make it up to me? At least let me play on my phone for 3 days. The word phone must have triggered something in my sensitive nerves. I shot up, yelling, David, try playing and see what happens. Itching for a spanking, are you? He stood there, grinning at me like a cunning little fox. A nurse came in with a tray. You're awake. Bed 24. Remember to eat on time from now on. Your blood sugar was ridiculously low. Speechless. What do you mean, eat on time? Low blood sugar? I avoided David's gaze guiltily. He looked at me with a half-smile. If it weren't for your low blood sugar, would a blunt fork have knocked you out? I struggled to maintain my dignity. It was just anger. You wouldn't understand. Chapter 17. As the saying goes, a wise man avoids danger. After what happened, I was determined to stay far away from Willow. The 1-year extension was almost up, so I had my lawyer send her a payment reminder. I wasn't worried she wouldn't pay. After all, I still had over 1.1 million in unpaid invoices from her husband Makoto. The money came through quickly. I then had my colleague draft a written notice to not renew our contract and checked over the accounts and inventory. Thanks to good word of mouth, excellent service, and riding the wave of the platform's early success, my business was doing better than ever. Many suppliers, even manufacturers, reached out to me directly to offer goods. Losing Makoto's supply line didn't affect me at all. In fact, if he lost me as a major client, his situation would likely worsen. Willow called me countless times. Fed up, I blocked her. She even came to my place, but I'd taken the last few days of vacation to take David on a trip to City C. As we were about to board, Makoto called me. Before he could start yelling, I spoke first. Makoto, you think I used dirty tricks to seduce Willow? Look where you are now. It's not my fault. Think carefully about who really ruined you. There was a long silence on the other end before the line went dead. Their story might go on for a long time, but what does that have to do with me? I just hope they stay together forever, locked in misery. Chapter 18. At the start of the new school term, I attended David's parent-teacher conference. The teacher announced the final rankings from last term. David's grades had always been average. Out of 1,000 students, he typically ranked between 300th and 400th. But this time, I was stunned. He had made it into the top 200 in his grade, especially in Chinese, the subject he had stopped taking tutoring for. He placed third in his class. His homeroom teacher told me, this child has potential. If he puts in a bit more effort, getting into the main high school division shouldn't be an issue. I was so excited that I shook the teacher's hand repeatedly, thanking them over and over. When we left the school, I was still on cloud 9. David looked at me in disdain. Dad, can you not be so pathetic? If I make it into the top 100 next time, are you going to be so happy you pass out? I chuckled. If I pass out, it'll be worth it. Your old man is what he is. Just wants you to have a bright future and a happy life. He stopped in front of me, giving me a disapproving look. Dad, you still have a long life ahead of you. I want to be your pride, but I don't want to be your only pride. I looked at him, his clear face, his tall figure. My young boy had grown up. I couldn't help but feel relieved. Son, your dad is ready to start living his own wonderful life too. David's story. Epilogue. Chapter 1. In my previous life, my parents divorced. My mom insisted on taking me to live with her. She had a new husband and a new son, and made me call Makoto Dad. I was like an extra person living in someone else's shell, surviving off a little bit of insignificant nourishment. They didn't abuse me, but seeing them live happily as a family, I always felt like an outsider. Makoto said, if you don't behave, go back to your real dad. Mom said, it's hard for mom to take care of you. What's wrong with your little brother bossing you around? Even my little brother, barely able to speak, would say in his childish voice, you're not my brother. You're an outsider. I would often sneak back to see my dad. He worked at a freight company. His once straight back was now hunched, his once clear eyes now clouded. Once, I saw him call out my name to a stray cat downstairs. David, it's been so long since you came by. Dad misses you so much. Later, while trying to get my little brother's kite out of a tree, I fell and hit the back of my head. Just like that, my life ended. At my funeral, everyone comforted my mom. Willow, take care. You still got the little one. Only Dad sat silently in the corner. I wanted to give him a hug, but I could only pass through his body. When Mom's family of 3 lay in a pool of blood afterward, Dad seemed like his soul had been sucked dry too. The wind on the rooftop easily blew him off. He said, son, don't be scared. Dad's here to be with you. Chapter 2. When I opened my eyes again, I was back in the year they divorced. Dad, dejected, silently endured Mom's constant verbal abuse. Even though Mom had already cheated and was hiding assets, he knew nothing and foolishly said to me, son, don't be mad at your mom. It's all Dad's fault. Your mom has never suffered like this. It's Dad who let her down. I rolled my eyes in secret. If he posted that online, he'd get roasted. I was reborn. There was no way for me to win Mom's heart back for him, but I could help him get his money back. I started gathering evidence of Mom's affair. Honestly, it wasn't even difficult. Mom was so sure of herself that she hadn't deleted a single compromising chat. I made an excuse to use her phone for research and easily collected several gigabytes of evidence. Chapter 3. The day came to decide my custody. Mom thought for sure I'd choose her. After all, Dad was bankrupt and unemployed, a failure. Family ties without financial security are like loose sand. It scatters after just a few steps. But I just glanced at her and said firmly, "I'll stay with Dad. Let him have more of the assets, or I'm afraid he won't be able to afford to raise me." In the bedroom, Mom tried to persuade me. "Come with me, son. You're a part of me. Only Mom loves you the most." I sighed, opened a video I had downloaded from her chat with Makoto, and said, "Mom, you're about to have your own child. Let Dad keep me. He's only got me." Honestly, I didn't hate her completely. My love was stronger. It kept me from getting trapped in hatred, struggling in vain. Instead, I embraced new life. Chapter 4. Dad is actually a very capable person. He was just worn down by a momentary failure. In my previous life, Uncle Victor invited him several times to start a new business, but he was too caught up in the pain of losing his marriage and son to agree. This time, I only needed to mention it lightly, and he agreed much more readily than I expected. He became more confident and decisive, more successful than I'd imagined. This was truly great. He is George. He's the father I'd never trade for anything.